Photosynthesis is the process used by plants, algae, and cyanobacteria to capture the energy of the sun and use it to make their own food from water and carbon dioxide. These days, most photosynthesizing organisms release oxygen as a waste byproduct, which keeps all us alive on this planet. Let's take a closer look at the process. By acquiring carbon dioxide, water, and sunlight, photosynthetic cells create a sugar molecule called glucose that is used to generate ATP during cell respiration when it is broken down. Water is received through the roots with the process of diffusion. Carbon dioxide is received from the atmosphere through structures in their leaves called stomata, and sunlight is received through organelles called chloroplasts. Chloroplasts are a type of pigment-containing organelle called a plastid, which store energy and food and carry out photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is primarily accomplished using a green pigment called chlorophyll, which absorbs red and blue light and reflects green light. They are the reason why some parts of a plant appear green to our eyes. Chloroplasts are encased in a double membrane called a chloroplast envelope, and each of these large organelles contains an internal membrane system called the thylakoid membrane. These stacks of thylakoid membranes create a maze of connected compartments full of chlorophyll. Because of their double membrane, chloroplasts are much like mitochondria, as the purpose of both organelles is to generate ATP. Photosynthesis takes place in two stages: light-dependent reactions and the light-independent reactions. In light-dependent reactions, those which require sunlight to work, solar energy is absorbed by chlorophyll and converted into electron carrier molecules called NADPH, or nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide phosphate, and ATP. During light-independent reactions, also called the Calvin cycle, the energized electrons gathered by NADPH and ATP during the light-dependent reaction get to work building carbohydrate molecules with carbon dioxide. After the energy is transferred, NADPH and ATP return to the light-dependent reactions to gather more energized electrons. Although the light-independent reactions don't require light to work, they need the output of the preceding light-dependent reactions to function. Now that glucose and oxygen are produced from photosynthesis, they are then used for another process for cellular respiration, a process where chemical energy is converted into work. The chemical reactions of cellular respiration happen in three main steps in order to release energy: glycolysis, the citric acid cycle, and chemiosmosis. Glycolysis takes place in the cytoplasm of the cell. In glycolysis, enzymes split glucose molecules into two, 3-carbon chains called pyruvate or pyruvic acid. First, 2 ATP are used up to divide 1 glucose into glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate, which is composed of 3 carbons and 1 phosphate group. Then, the glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate is converted into pyruvate, which yields 4 ATP. Since energy is required to split the glucose, the process of glycolysis requires 2 ATP. Because 4 ATP is produced from pyruvate, only 2 molecules move on to the second stage of cellular respiration, along with energy-carrying molecules called NAD+, or nicotinamide adenine diphosphate. During glycolysis, electrons are transferred to 2 NAD+ to make 2 molecules of NADH, which stores energy for later in the cellular respiration process. The citric acid cycle, or the CAC, happens within the matrix of the inner membrane of a cell's mitochondria. Its purpose is to mix carbons broken down during glycolysis with oxygen. It completes the oxidation of the glucose sugars that started being processed during glycolysis. 6 sugars entered the respiration pathway at glycolysis, and a total of 6 must exit. The CAC allows 2 carbon molecules to enter the cycle at a time. These molecules are called acetyl coenzyme A or acetyl-CoA, which are oxidized in the respiration pathway. These two carbons come from the pyruvate that was created from glycolysis. While two of the carbons from the pyruvate enters the CAC, the last carbon of this three-carbon molecule bonds with an oxygen molecule and leaves the cell as CO2. Molecules entering the CAC go around it twice, once for each pyruvate that enters it. However, those molecules don't necessarily have to complete two full rotations, since the cell can siphon off carbons for other macromolecules, or put more into the cycle by sacrificing amino acids or capitalizing on the energy stored in fat. In the CAC, acetyl-CoA enters the cycle and combines with oxaloacetate to form citrate. The citric acid is oxidized over the course of many steps, shedding carbons all the way around the cycle until it eventually gets back to oxaloacetic acid. As carbons drop off the citric acid, they turn into carbon dioxide, which is then removed from the cell before it is exhaled by the organism. During the second oxidation, a new high-energy bond is made with the sulfur of acetyl-CoA to produce succinate-CoA, which contains enough energy to produce a molecule called GTP, or guanosine triphosphate, which has the equivalent amount of energy as an ATP. Acetyl-CoA is then removed from succinate-CoA, leaving behind a succinate molecule in the cycle. Chemical bonds are then rearranged through a series of steps, and oxidation restores succinate to the original oxaloacetate. This process of the pathway produces a low-energy FADH molecule and a final NADH molecule. All the electrons carrier molecules from the CAC will now move across the membrane of the mitochondria and begin the process of chemiosmosis where ATP is made. In the process, the electron carrier molecules will cause an imbalance of the ion concentration inside the membrane, creating an electrochemical gradient. The hydrogen ions inside the mitochondria will then begin to flow across the membrane where the concentration of ions is lower, via channels in the membrane made of an enzyme complex called ATP synthase. As the hydrogen ions flow through ATP synthase, energy is created for ATP synthesis. The electrons that have lost most of their energy after this process will combine with oxygen to form water. In summary, photosynthesis and cellular respiration work together that results in the products of carbon dioxide, water, and ATP that plants can use as energy to grow and survive. That's everything we have in this lesson. If you need to review what you learned, go to www.scienceaide.com and access our study guide, download the PDF, and learn science smarter.